Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
So let us just check whether everything... yeah, here we are. Okay, fantastic. So yesterday, a delayed flight from Frankfurt. Now we're here. We missed the party. For me, it's the first time in Ireland. I guess for you, not in this case. And so, super excited to share with you some insights about Drees and Sommer and Jacobs, our development. And this is the title of the presentation. As you see, collaboration during design and construction. There's a question mark. We will see whether these are really two different perspectives from our side. And yeah, first of all, we would like to share with you the overall plot of our presentation and what our story is about. Yeah, and the main story and our storyline is that I don't want to spoiler too much, just directly up front. We met at a conference and we're both listening to our presentations and found out, wow, there are a lot of similarities and we never met before. We're from completely different markets. There must be some kind of underlying, so to speak, natural constant concept. Probably, let's see, that's as well up to your opinion. And this is what it's all about. So the main story, of course, like the motto is sharing is caring. This is why we're here with you guys. And as I said, we represent two organizations working like in different countries. Like we have comparable challenges. And the thing is, of course, since we face these challenges, we need to develop solutions like in fast-track projects. And so this is our aha moment, our eureka moment where we met and then found out, wow, I mean, Ian, did you take a look over my shoulder for the past couple of years? What happened?
I didn't know who Drees and Sommer were about a year ago, right? So.
Yeah, that's true. Although I knew what Jacobs is. And so, probably that's the question overall. Is it really a common understanding which drove us here? Let's see. So, just a short introduction. The gentleman here.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ian Harding, and I'm the BIM section head for Jacobs. I've been working with Jacobs for 2.5 years. I joined March 2021, lived in Australia for about 9 years before that. Obviously, you can hear my accent as opposed to Moritz, so I am a native Irish person as opposed to Moritz being from Germany. I grew up in Ireland and I moved overseas, did the Irish pilgrimage to Australia. A lot of us end up doing. Spent 9 years there working in various sectors and industries. Finished my time up there working for a large water authority in Melbourne and led the organisation in driving digital, the use of processes and changing the way people's attitudes are in construction and ultimately looking at it from a whole life cycle approach. Returned to Ireland in 2020, which at the time I thought was mid-COVID. I was completely wrong. October 2020 was very early COVID. I got home and I secured a role with Jacobs. My partner and I spent a long time overseas, so it's great to be home. Great to see an event like this as well in my own country as well, compared to what we normally go to London or Germany for these sort of events. So it's great to see this event here. But yeah, so I manage a team of 14 people. We deliver pharmaceutical projects out of the Ireland office. We'd have teams all around the world working on projects all the way from the Philippines to India, to Milan, to Ireland, to the US. So our projects run 24 hours a day, and it's part of my team's role to make sure that they run as efficiently as possible, both from a technical point of view in BIM, as well as that 3D coordination and the sort of things we'll talk about today as well. So thank you.
Okay, cool. And my name is Moritz Mombour. I'm from Frankfurt. I'm as well into BIM as one could guess. And so I'm a registered architect. I'm responsible for the overall BIM development at Drees and Sommer. We're a company roughly about 6,000 employees, and as well we're in fast-track projects when it comes to, for example, semiconductor facilities and as well pharmaceutical projects. And I'm responsible, or I work with a team of like 30 people. As well, interdisciplinary, so both MEP and architecture and structure, and so it's up to like pipeline development, process development, so making the most.
Very straightforward projects, right?
Yeah, very straightforward projects. Probably very German. Let's see. Yeah, and the main thing is to make the most out of as well technology for the project itself. So that's the main aim. And this is what we want to share with you today. And so before we dive deep, we want to establish some common ground, something everyone can relate to. And so a couple of aspects, like a bit as well, a historical part, working like with local files, you have to send them over, you have to federate them, you set up clash tests, probably file-based selection, and then moving on, probably discover search sets and Notepad++ and search and replace and all this kind of stuff you need to move in a fast-track project, keep track. Appearance profilers, and this is, as probably one could guess, a lot of technical aspects. Yeah, but the main thing is, why do we do all this? Like, if you just compare, like 3 of these 4 buckets is a technical part. We do all this to focus on communication and on the communication aspect of coordination. And so this is where it all comes down. This is a bit of graphical context for you to relate to. And we are doing all this because we want to support on the very right side the communication aspect and the coordination meetings, and to make the most out of this. So, okay, a lot of technique, now the focus, but why? Why all this? Why would you invest a lot of time in project structures and setups in this environment? Because, and I guess for me, that's one of the main claims. A clash is not necessarily an issue, and it's not really a result. It's just a part of the process, and if it's solved, then it's all good. Yeah, we want a built project. It's not just about a technical stunt, and it's not just about technical possibilities. It's about supporting the project. And so...
Yeah, and then for me as well, it's about that valuable message that we deliver out to the teams, right? So communicating, we hear this in industry so much about the right thing at the right time, or the right information at the right time. And I suppose one of the stories we'll share today is how, again, differently, but ultimately coming together and realizing we have achieved that together, following this similar processes, but in a very different way. But getting that valuable message out to the teams, I'm talking about your projects teams and construction teams, and getting it there at the right time, following that schedule and delivering the information correctly is so paramount to how we deliver it, right? So I cannot underestimate the importance of going back and looking at your projects and ensuring that, how do I get that message to the right time? It's all great to have the clash or the issue or the design issue or the coordination issue in construction. It's all great to have that, but is that at the right time? Is it too late, or is it even too early, right? It's about getting that message clear, right? And hopefully we'll touch on that later and elaborate a bit more on that.
Focus on the things needed and not just everything,
right,
because it's possible. Just because of is not a good reason. So, okay, now we made clear who we are, established a common ground, and gave some, at least, insights on our answer to the question why. And now we want to take you with us on the trip itself. As we said, okay, what's the idea? Jacobs has a history in model-based coordination and the development, Drees and Sommer as well. And we want to show you, like, where are parallels, where are differences, where did we, from our point of view, end up in the right place. You can decide for yourself if this fits for you as well. So let's go.
Yeah, so I think as we, like Moritz and I introduced each other back in February this year, we sort of got talking, like I said in that message, like Moritz mentioned in that message, we got talking, and we sort of realized is that our processes and workflows, we had the same or similar journey. And as you can see on screen here, I mean, our processes and how we ran it in Jacobs from 2011 till now, we use Navis and Excel-based coordination. We had introduction to more cloud-based solutions come around the late 2018, 2019. We had those tools where issue tracking and collaboration started to get more mainstream and more common. So obviously our team started to explore that as well. And then we came to the approach where we realized that our journeys were not going the right path, and we needed to reassess and reconfigure and standardize our processes. And interestingly, Drees and Sommer had a very similar path, as you can see below. Navis to Revisto as a coordination tool is very similar, and as we discussed, and as you'll see from what Moritz has to explain and the real deep level of how they run coordination, where I'll explain in more than 10,000 feet level, you'll see that overlap and that actual timeline connect very well, if you want to move on. And then, as you see, we approached just earlier this year, we actually got introduced to each other at the first Revisto global conference called RevUp over in Dallas in Texas. And that's why we're here today, really, because we discovered that timeline, that differences we had and the challenges we had in coordination. And I suppose the ultimate outcome for us now is that any projects we end up collaborating and working on together, we know our workflows, we know the processes we have. We've stripped through all the issues around sharing information with each other in a really difficult way. We're just streamlined, and our connection together will ultimately lead to not just us being successful in Jacobs, but the project, Drees and Sommer, the client, everyone being successful in how we deliver and execute the project. We all know how sharing information between not just your own company, but external companies and projects is difficult. So the way we've approached it now is, we know that we work together, we're going to be pretty well set, right?
And the idea is, since now this is the timeline, and Ian will focus, for example, on the software ecosystem, and I will basically tell you about the other side of the story, like the configuration and how this evolved over time, that you can locate yourself on the timeline where you're at and probably take things out of what we discovered and encountered and make the most out of it. Probably jump forward or just skip a couple of steps or whatever you decide to do with the information.
Okay, yeah, so kind of looking at it from a 10,000 feet level in Jacobs, if you want to just roll on. So taking that into more of a contextual point of view from where we went from 2011 to 2019. So yes, it was Navis and Excel, but what did that look like? Again, what Moritz mentioned from maybe a technology workflow, right? So a lot of the ordering tools you see on the left, from 2011 till 2020, it was maybe AutoPlant as opposed to Plant 3D. Plant 3D got introduced a bit around the mid decade of last decade. We had file server, file-based management of all of our models. Around 2016, 2017, we started to use BIM 360 and started to explore that cloud-based. Remember, I joined 2.5 years ago, so it was my team before me, right? And then we started to federate, or in 2011 to 2019, we started to federate models in Navis and coordinate that way. And I suppose the primary focus of this discussion between Moritz and I is really on this part of the journey, right? So the authoring tool, one of the great benefits of me when I joined Jacobs was the predecessors of my organization had solved many of the basic problems around using Revit, using Plant 3D and running authoring, getting your quantities, designing properly and following those clear standards. So I was lucky in the fact that those processes were in place, and I could focus a lot of our journey then on how we actually collaborate interdiscipline and with the client. And you can see that the teams before me all use Excel-based issue tracking, coordination, XML files in Navis, sharing it through emails, sharing it through messages and conversations, maybe in the old MSN apps as opposed to teams that we have today. And it made it very irregular and not very straightforward for teams to actually coordinate. And what that meant was our teams were not delivering the quality or joined up thinking solutions that we'd want. If you want to go forward. Yeah. So kind of approaching it more closer to when I joined Jacobs, you see the teams really started to think about this around, okay, again, focusing only on our coordination, started to move everything into BIM 360, started to explore BIM 360 Glue as a platform to run that more live connected coordination. And then started using different types of issue tracking tools to start to explore how saving times from the teams in introducing dashboards, coordination, again, started to centralize that communication pathway. And this, for me, was such a great, before I joined, to see this had already started in the organization, because it set the pathway up for me to actually then take it to the next level. So the team before me had done a great job to get to this point. And if you're at this point as well, what I found was we had 3 different types of issue trackers being used to manage projects. It just depended on the project team. That obviously wasn't efficient enough. That wasn't the way we wanted to work. Every time a project team moved on to the next project, they just could not adapt quick enough because the software had changed, right? So if you want to roll on again.
just in addition, that's always a downside if you use various issue management systems and tracking for several tasks, people just get confused. I mean, this is for sure a downside. So this is why as well we took this part.
So kind of, I'll touch deeply onto the now a bit later on, but from when I joined, straight away we had discussions internally and identified, we ended up using, so I didn't label all the platforms there, we had 4 platforms to coordinate between 2019 and 2021, 4 platforms just to run coordination, just to make sure that we had issues or clashes identified correctly to be able to share onto the teams. The waste and effort was just astronomical in making sure that the issue got from raising it to closed in a timely fashion. So one of the key roles I had, and in fact I'd implemented Revisto while living in Australia, so I had a little bit of exposure to it, but one of the key elements was to run reviews against the different coordination platforms. I mean, there must be 7, 8, 9, 10 of these platforms out today, all available to people to use. And what we wanted to do was streamline. We needed to get a partner in place that was able to help us streamline our processes and drive a more efficient approach. So when we approached the Revisto solution, we implemented that tool. And we ended up taking away those 4 tools and delivering it in one solution. But as I'll touch on a bit later, it was the workflows that really shift. It wasn't just changing our platforms from 4 to 1. It was the workflow shift that we had around how we actually link it to our schedule, right? So we have our design has to go to IFC to be built on site. Our construction dates are key. And being able to link that P6 schedule all the way back to our whole design execution through a tool like Revisto was quite a game changer in our workflows and how we actually work together as a team. So I'll touch on that a bit later on. Right?
The main benefit is if the information is accessible, you don't have to invest a lot of time to already start working. Yeah, you just get the information to your hand and you can directly start. So it's as well a question of invest. If you have to invest a lot of time to start, and this is what we skipped and basically streamlined as well in our case. So coming or switching over to the process side, and more under configuration aspect, I want to share with you our development of the clash test approach over the years. Starting with Navisworks, classic Navisworks, and how some of the concept then later on were kept and transferred according to the possibilities of new technology. So starting with a project, in our case, that's a high-rise project, and it, I guess, feels pretty natural that you start to come up with the idea. If you have such a huge project, you don't coordinate everything at once. You start setting up clusters, and in this case, we were as well responsible for the MEP design. We work with microstations, so it was file-based per level. Somehow felt natural to tackle it this way. And so we set up clusters, for example, in the reddish color, just to highlight one. And then we kept on moving. We had single files. We federated them in NWFs for the clusters. We set up viewpoints, as I said before, when I pointed out the common ground, Navisworks. And then we linked this to a clash matrix. I mean, straightforward without diving into Excel, but you know the matrix itself, I guess some of you. And this is how we tackled our coordination in the meetings. We had a clear topic. We basically had a digestible portion of a nice meal prepared.
Moritz, you're taking me back 5 years here. Can you keep going? I don't want to see this again.
It's all good. We will move on. Just to give context. Yeah, in this case, it worked out. It was already a good idea for a mega project. It was like 2019. Navisworks making the most out of it, and as well under the respect that in the organization there were not just full-blown Navisworks high-end experts. Yeah, it was something a lot of people could use. It was like a trade-in in between, okay, invest of time to prepare, for example, to give something to relate, a set up 3 days in this case. And I will give you a couple of numbers for the next steps. And this is how just in a graphical manner this looked like, a part of the overall project. When you take out a cluster, You have a couple of levels and the different trade models, and you federate them, and then you coordinate them just in this manner, and you go cluster by cluster by cluster. That's the idea. And already back then, the cluster for sure was linked to the schedule, the overall project schedule, which makes perfect sense to not just coordinate everything at once, because that's not the way how we do it, at least. Then in the next step, we kept on moving. We discovered Revizto and the possibilities of Revizto, and we tried to move on with this idea of, okay, we try to break what we coordinate down into digestible pieces. And so we moved over in a large infrastructure project to the search sets, to use metadata, to split as well on below file level the single elements. And then came up with a far more elaborated clash matrix, meaning, okay, we wanted to push this to dashboards, we wanted to visualize what's happening there in a more delicate way that you could filter it out. So this is as well a quite common approach. I guess like a couple of days ago, I saw someone, for example, automating this kind of process for the setup with the priorities in Excel with macros, just to create XML files to do the setup. So in our case, it was roughly about 200 tests or something. And this is already a lot. If you want to have an overview, you need to, so to speak, build up like a tandem in between the single test and then an overview. You don't want to be too atomized in the way you tackle the problem. So this was the downside of this approach, but it was extremely specific. You ask a specific question, you get the direct answer. Not only when it comes to views and clashes, but as well to numbers. And then we linked this to Revizto, and Revizto already back then offered something super nice, stamps. It's like a predefined combination of priorities, of assignees, coloring. The coloring was linked to the appearance profiler. So a pretty neat process. And since we transferred the issues from Navisworks to Revizto, and our aim in this project was to communicate with people in the field, we invested a lot of time to produce these markups in Navisworks, 2D with the corresponding search set that only people see what they really need to see. We already gave them back then the grid and the levels to locate in space. And this is something super neat. Just a couple of days ago, with the new Revizto version, this is automated. This was our request to implement in the Clash automate the automated top view. So this was a lot of work, and thank you for implementing this a while ago. So this is how it felt like. Yeah, a structured process with a really neat clash matrix. You got priorities, you get assignees, and we already have this centralized issue management. And then it was 2022, and Revizto Plus was introduced. And what I just, like 2 steps ago, mentioned, we tried to break down the project by files and clusters. Was a huge advantage here that they implemented coordination zones, because basically this is what we were looking for. Volumes where you can break down the project and you can focus on a specific area, because now it's meaningful, and according to schedule we should coordinate it prioritized. So this in the middle, for example, is a coordination issue, just a volume. You can, so to speak, classify it, and then you can use it as a filter to just view issues in this specific area and focus on this. And it offered the possibility for us to automate the process quite a lot. And this as well has advantages, but it came as well with the downside. If you automate everything and you got everything defined and classified and prioritized, but you hand over the full information, all the clashes, some of the users might get nervous because the numbers don't count for the overall project, but just for a specific volume. This is what we will come to in a minute. Is the mic, I guess, a bit too loud? Is it okay? Okay. So now, future is now. So this where both should come together from our point of view, and it's a question, is this really a seamless interaction? Let's see. So where we're at right now, from Drees and Sommer side, probably you remember the amount of tests we had, like in the mid stage, it was up to 200 tests. We completely compressed it, shrinked it down. It's below 20 tests. We follow the idea to have one for overviews, one for the single clashes, and they are as well grouped. And we still follow the idea and kept this of the search set using the metadata because we are the authors of the design, so we can establish the full pipeline. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to invest in templates if you work with them afterwards. When it comes to coordination, when it comes to bill of quantities, I guess that's pretty natural. And two ways to go. Since the grouping is a really nice possibility in Revitsto, we did this before with Clash Grouper and Navisworks, so this is a huge improvement here as well, that it's directly implemented, grouping overview, and then the single grouping. And we achieved the small amount of tests since we used custom properties to group the clashes in the clash test itself. I will show you in a minute. And first, we will start with the grouping overview. So it's grouped by zone. Remember the cluster, by zone and by level. And we can basically offer users, okay, you get an overview in your single building, in a cluster, in a level. You want to focus on this, you want to get an overview, what's happening right now, there you are. That's one part of the story. Here in this case, it's focused on MEP versus structure. And for the grouping single, we use custom properties. We will see this just on the next slide. But one of the real benefits is the issue automation, because it's condition-based prioritizing. So when you establish templates and you establish search sets and you find the right information with the search set, you can tell the system, okay, this is the assignee, this is the priority, add tags, automatically create a dashboard. So this comes down to the point, if you streamline the process, you got all the information to your hand. You don't have to invest every time for every cycle a lot of work just to get a result. That's the idea of streamlining the process. And this is what it looks like right here. So for those who are familiar with Revitsto, we have the tests, and then on the right side, this is the appearance in the Clash Automate. And what you see right here and what is highlighted is the Clash naming. Oh, wait for a second. Need to go back for a second.
You're there.
Yeah. I got a pointer here, but I guess it does not fully work. Just right here. Just according to the coding, we use custom properties to group in this manner to not establish a lot of tests. That's the result overall. And when you remember the stamps to give someone a visual feedback, this is as well something automatically being handed over to the single clashes, so we have the right information at the right time with a lot of less effort than before. That's the overall idea. And this is the naming of the clash itself with a clear pattern. And if you want to use a fast search functionality, users know the naming convention. They can directly spot what they are up to and focus on a certain topic.
Yeah, so before I go on to that, just for us and Jacobs, a very similar process, but for me, what was so different how we approached things before was that issue automation what Moritz was mentioning at the right-hand side, where we had a test where if we did it any other way, there'd be 12 versions of this test. With Revisto, we had one version, and we simplified that from 12 to 1 because the conditions we make in our issue automation meant that we could create like a spider web and set conditions that depending on these conditions, it would send it out to this stamp, out to this priority, to this tag, to this assignee, and it just simplified that entire process. So instead of running a clash test we had intumescent paint it's a particular coating that we apply on steel, and we need to make sure we're 50 millimeters clear of that intumescent paint, all disciplines. So there's 12 tests to run that we did in one single test, because intumescent paint, if it met the architectural conditions, it would go to the architectural team. If it met piping, it would go to the piping team, all from one test. And while that part of it was automated, we did still review the clashes to make sure or clearances to make sure that they were sufficient to issue out. That spider web was such a game changer in how we manage our coordination. No more adjusting it in Excel, manually changing it to the right people. We just automated that part, right?
And the stamps offer the possibility, if you have a new project and you have the setup all done, you can adjust it and you're good to go. So no 3 days setting up a large project, a lot faster and structured.
Our setup time is about 30 minutes now.
Yeah. Okay.
So then just from the Jacobs perspective, right, where we are now, I suppose what you're looking at here is how we execute our design reviews. And you can see that on the left-hand side here, we have the review areas, a floor plan of one of our buildings, and it's broken down by certain zones, right? And those zones either relate to the construction sequence or they relate to the process engineering principles, because it's a pharmaceutical plant. And then on the right-hand side, we have our originally developed the P6 schedule from our scheduling team. What falls out of that then is a design review schedule that's linked to the actual zones on the left-hand side. And you can see the zones are colored. You can see the names of the zone, you can see the description, and then you can see the 30% review, 60% review, and we've got one little 90% review up there on this schedule. And then that's how we always did it, right? We had those reviews, we had the planned dates, and then we had to kind of scramble with our model coordination to make sure that we're reviewing the right area, to make sure that the clashes are in the right area, the issues, and that was the old way of us approaching it. Not just for the clashes, but even the design issues. So a client might have an issue, we hit 60% in this zone. How do we actually manage in Excel the tracking of those issues, right? Where we are today, though, is on the left-hand side, if you go back.
Pardon? Wait for a second.
On the left-hand side, it's just a box, right? It's a blue box, but that is actually modeled in Revit. That represents that mass. If you think of that 2D plan I just showed you in the last slide, that's actually created, those areas are created in 3D in Revit as a mass, and then imported into Revisto as a zone. So similar to what Moritz was referring to earlier. And then on the right-hand side, so you got the blue box on the left represents a zone. This is actually the geometry that's inside that zone, and this is actually a review area as part of the release of information. So again, it ties into the P6 schedule of when we need everything built on site, back to the design review schedule of when we need to review all of our issues and clashes and coordinate to make sure that when we hit post 90%, we go to IFC and we're actually coordinated and therefore delivering a quality design to construction on time, right? So that's what it looks like. Move on. And then in the clash automation tool, which Morris shared on earlier, you'll see on the top left, we actually have a filter by 1030C, which is that blue box I just showed you there. So instead of us reviewing for this clash test all the electrical versus mechanical for the entire building and trying to filter out just for that zone, we can easily filter in one click down to, these are just, there's 192, 95 total in this clash test. We're down to like 20, 26 that we're actually reviewing just for that zone. So we're heading closer to the point of going to the right information at the right time. Instead of reviewing that entire electrical versus mechanical for the entire building, we just focus it, because we have a 60% review coming up in 2 weeks, we filter by just that zone, review those clashes, push them to the issue tracker. Before I go on to that, you'll see this is what it looks like in 3D, where we had the red and green boxes representing the clashes in that zone, and then we have then the actual issues in the stamps being displayed in 3D as well. So not just for the clashes, but also for those design issues. And then you'll see over on the left-hand side, so this is what most people will see. So what you're just seeing there is more the technical side around how the BIM coordinator or spatial coordinator or digital delivery person would manage and coordinate the issues. But here is the interface that most people see in our projects. And what we're able to do as a maybe a piping designer or an architectural lead or a structural designer filter down by that zone. They know that review's coming up, the 60% review. They know when they see a clash in the issue tracker, they know it relates to a review that's happening very, very shortly. So instead of them getting 3,000 or 195 in this case, 195 issues for that entire test, they're only getting the 26 that relates to the zone that they're actually reviewing in 2 weeks' time. So they can focus their effort on just that area, make sure that they review and close and solve those issues. And as you can see there, just some progress there happening on the right. Then over here, we have our dashboards then that got generated. So we share that out to the groups, and they can then track all those issues through the closure. And you can see the total for that one zone, 1030C issues, is 369 closed, and we have 23 open and a few in progress and solved. And that teams then have a clear demonstration of how it's working.
So this leads us to the conclusion. Just to mention, this was not just about clashes, stems as well for manual reviewing the models, for designers who just add a lot of value without knowing Clash Automate. This was the idea to streamline and to basically invite everyone to participate, not only a couple of technical experts. And so the conclusion is, and probably your take-home message, we chose a quote, "Simplify then add lightness" by Colin Chapman. So whatever we did, and we tried to achieve our goals, we built up a setup, and it kept evolving, and it became more and more according to the dashboards. There should be, from our point of view, always the will to cut this down, to make the most out of it for everyone involved in the project. And since Lotus is as well about race cars and timing, so the next message.
Yeah, I suppose it's you got to challenge the accepted, right? We hear that a lot, but you've seen from both our journeys, that's what we did. We challenged the accepted. It was the industry standard ways of working that was always in our industry. We said, well, is this the right way? And for us, in our processes, the answer was no, and we needed to be pragmatic and approach in a simplify and add lightness, right? And that was such a great quote for me. But that's what we did, right? And we use the technology then to meet the client and the project needs, right?
So, thank you. And enjoy the summit.
Yeah, thanks everybody.